Good morning. So first of all, I would like to thank ETF for inviting me to this event. It's a pleasure for me to be here, to be able to explain what we are doing in the European Commission and at European Union about quality assurance in VET. And also it's very interesting for me to learn more about the developments in the ETF partner countries. So I will explain the... I will first try to arrange my PowerPoint. Yes. Yes, that's fine. Thank you. Great. So, as you probably know, the work in quality assurance in VET at European level is based on the EQAVET recommendation. So the recommendation was adopted in 2009 and by the Council and the Parliament, and lays down the reference framework for quality assurance. It's developed within the Copenhagen process, so which I guess you also all know already. So it's referring to the process whereby the ministers of VET in 2002 agreed to reinforce cooperation among the different European countries. And over the last 10-15 years, quality assurance has been high on the agenda of this Copenhagen process. So, but first, I think it's very important to clarify what we mean with quality assurance. So, quality assurance is, in particular, the process to ensure that quality and to reach defined objectives. So, defined objectives, they vary, of course, between member states, but often, I mean, the most common are, of course, increasing employability, increasing social inclusion. So, this is these are common goals, but of course, you have also many different differences at national level and regional level. So, but it's in particular important to understand and to be aware that we're talking about mainly processes to ensure quality and desired outcomes. So the next picture, this is not a picture of how I would look like in 10 years' time. This is this is a picture of Deming, who developed the PDCA cycle, so the planning, doing, checking, acting cycle, which he developed several decades ago, but which is still often used in quality assurance management. And also for our EQAVET framework, this is one of the cornerstones of our recommendation. So, as you probably know, so we have developed descriptors at VET system level and VET provider level for each of these phases, where we ask member states to really look into these elements and try to implement these at national level. So you will see the quality cycle, which is also here represented on the graph, and which is really a fundamental aspect of EQAVET. So in total, in the recommendation, there are more than 40 descriptors laid down, and whereby about 22 are at VET system level and 20 at VET provider level. So it's also important to know that both levels have an important role to play in fostering quality assurance. And within this framework, it's important also to know that it's set up as a meta framework and a toolbox. This means that we don't expect that all member states will implement and follow all these 40 descriptors, but we expect, of course, that they will implement those which are crucial for them, for their local context. And I will not go through all these 40 descriptors. I will just highlight some which are very important, like, for example, the descriptor at VET system level, indicating that there should be a national or regional quality assurance framework dealing with, in particular, standards at VET provider level. Or another important descriptor at VET system level deals with self-evaluation, that there is an internal and external review of the system. So that's also very important in fostering quality assurance. So these are two examples at VET system level. And also at VET provider level, there are, as I mentioned, more than 20 descriptors. And one of them, for example, is about the involvement of staff in planning and also including in particular with regard to quality development. So I think tomorrow morning we will discuss more in detail the importance of staff and how to include them in quality assurance development. So this is an important descriptor which I think is applicable to almost all situations. And then another aspect is about learner feedback. Also, that's very important that we expect that VET providers, they get data about the satisfaction and the feedback of learners about the VET provision. So that's also a very important element in the framework. In addition to the descriptors, there are also 10 indicators defined. And also there we have a quite important range of different topics which are being addressed. For example, we have very important indicators about the placement rates to see what's the employment situation of a VET student after having finished its program, for example, 1 year after finishing its program, or and also indicator 6 is very important about to which extent are the acquired skills learned at the during the VET training used at the workplace. So these are, for example, very important indicators, and also which are in fact relevant for almost all situations. Then now we have the EQAVET recommendation in place since about 7 years, and we have seen that there are some important achievements of the last years. So we have now in all member states and all participating countries a national reference point established. So as you probably know, the NRPs, the EQAVET NRPs, they play a crucial role in the implementation of EQAVET. So their tasks of the NRPs are also described in the recommendation, and they are to on the one hand adapt the descriptors and indicators to the local context, to translate them in the national languages, and to adapt it and further develop the framework at national and regional level. And also an important other achievement is that based on the recommendation, we have developed a lot of guidance and a lot of additional material dealing with several aspects of the recommendation throughout working groups, throughout peer learning activities, and I think Keith will explain this more in detail later on about the achievements so far and how the guidance for member states has been developed. And so in this way, we have established a kind of community of practice with experts in quality assurance in VET, and which improve indeed VET quality assurance at member state level. So on this slide you will see how the guidance is structured, but Keith will develop this more in detail later on. In 2013 we had an important external evaluation done of the implementation of the EQAVET recommendation, and one of the conclusions was that the EQAVET recommendation helped to improve quality assurance developments in 2/3 of the member state. So there is a clear positive impact of the recommendation at member state level. It's interesting to note that this external evaluation was not only based on stakeholders interviews, for example, but also it analyzed measures at national level and tried to understand to which extent these were new developments which were influenced by the EQAVET recommendation. So it was not only based on interviews, but also really looking into rules, regulations, laws that have been implemented in many member states or have been changed following the EQAVET recommendation. So that's a very positive finding. Also, the external evaluators, they found that it was a good decision to use the recommendation for this, because as you know, in the field of education training, the European Commission and European Union has not many powers, so we can't issue directives or regulations, so it's very soft law. But still, it was found that by adopting a recommendation, it indeed increased the topic of quality assurance on the political agenda, so which was very positive. And then also it was found that the EQAVET recommendation, in fact, is consistent and complementary with other EU tools, like, for example, EQF and EQAVET. As you know, for example, in the recommendation of EQAVET, there is a reference to the EQF saying that by implementing EQAVET, we will or we should try to also foster the implementation of the EQF. But however, some topics were less addressed in the EQAVET recommendation. For example, certification or assessment of learners, work-based learning. Some elements are less addressed and are not explicitly mentioned in the recommendation, and this was found as a weakness, and I will come later back to this topic when I will discuss the next steps for EQAVET. So as I mentioned, the recommendation has had indeed positive effects at member state level. Also one of the conclusions of the external evaluation was that the material and the guidance developed within the framework of the EQAVET recommendation was seen by the stakeholders as user-friendly and effective to improve their systems at national level. And also another observation was that NRPs, the national reference points, often lack sources or don't have a clear mandate to carry out their tasks. So this was also pointed out as a weakness within the framework or within the implementation of the framework. So that's about the external evaluation, but now when we come to the new developments about EQAVET, so there are 4 important new developments with regard to the implementation of the recommendation. So first we had a restricted call for proposal for NRPs. Then we will complement, or we are now complementing the EQAVET framework. Also, we will increase the reporting of quality assurance developments and also the EQAVET governance. There are some changes with regard to that. So I will now explain this more in detail. So as I mentioned before, the external evaluation mentioned that in some cases the NRPs don't have enough funding. So therefore the Commission has, in cooperation with the European Agency for Culture and Audiovisual Media, has developed or launched a call for proposal end of last year in November, to specifically targeting NRPs in order to develop their activities further. So we had a budget of 1.5 million for this activity for 1 year of operation of the NRPs, and the deadline was 2 weeks ago. So we are currently now evaluating and assessing the proposals that have been submitted by the NRPs, and so we expect that we will select quite many projects to further develop the activities of NRPs. Then the next important development is about complementing the EQAVET framework. As I mentioned, some topics are not explicitly addressed in the recommendation. So I was talking about work-based learning, assessment of learners, qualification design. And so therefore, in agreement with the EQAVET network, we have established a working group to develop new descriptors and indicators to addressing these topics. So we are currently in the process of elaborating this. So we had a few weeks ago the first meeting of this working group, and in 2 weeks' time we will have our next meeting of this working group, which so has the task to develop new descriptors and indicators. So in this way we are in line with the recommendation, which is calling member states and the Commission to further develop the descriptors and indicators. And in particular, we have to show as an EQAVET network that we are responsive to new developments. And now work-based learning is much more on the agenda than 10 years ago, for example. So we really have to show that the network and the framework is able of keeping up with new trends and new priorities. So therefore, it's important, this work that we will do. And so at the end of this working group, we hope to have a document which will then hopefully approved by the EQAVET network as indicating new descriptors and indicators for EQAVET. So this is currently still underway, so I cannot really give you more information about the final outcome of this, because we are still working on this topic and on defining with the member states to which and how we should phrase these new descriptors and indicators. So then the next improvement or change that we foresee within the implementation of EQAVET is about reporting. One of the objectives of the recommendation is to increase transparency of quality assurance measures and systems in order to build trust in qualifications between member states, so that in one member state, when their quality assurance measures and systems are more transparent, then most likely there will be more trust in qualifications awarded by another country. So that's a bit the philosophy also, which is explicitly mentioned in the recommendation. However, in the external evaluation, it was noted that EQAVET, or the implementation of the recommendation, did not really foster the idea or the transparency of quality assurance measures at national level. So this was found as a weakness, and therefore, in agreement also with the EQAVET network, we have proposed that we will increase the reporting on quality assurance measures at national level. So as of this year, all NRPs will, on the one hand, reply to a survey, which was also already done in the past, so that will not change a lot. So a survey about how member states implement the recommendation and how they develop their quality assurance measures. But also, and I think this will be very important also to follow up, for example, on the Riga medium-term deliverable, we are asking member states to describe in more qualitative way how they develop and what are the new trends in their country. So this is an important development. So we have launched this exercise in January this year with a deadline of mid-March. So I think that normally in 2-3 weeks time we will get a lot of information reports by EQAVET NRPs explaining how they have which new measures they have taken in the last year. So, and the idea is that we will do this reporting exercise on a yearly basis. So normally we will ask each NRP in the beginning of each year to report on new developments in their member states. So of course for this year, which is a bit the first year, it will be more time consuming, but we expect that as of next year this exercise will be lighter for the member states, and it will be less hard work to report on the new developments in the member state. And so this is an important development. Then when it comes to the last element about new trends or new developments in the implementation of EQAVET, I would like to refer to the EQAVET governance. So as such, there are no important changes foreseen, although we have proposed some slight changes. As you might know, we used to organize each year an EQAVET annual forum, which was a bit our network meeting, so where all members of the network came together and decide on the priorities of our network. And in fact, a forum is perhaps not the correct name to call this, because a forum often people understand that it's a much wider event open to all stakeholders with an interest in EQAVET, and so we will transform a bit this EQAVET annual forum into indeed a wider event, not only limited to members or EQAVET NRPs, but also, for example, to vet providers at national level or to other interested stakeholders, which we not always can reach easily, because that's also one of the observations we saw, that in some countries the NRPs play a very good role and they really involve vet stakeholders at national level, vet providers, for example, but in some other countries this is not so well done. So therefore, by organizing this large annual forum, we hope to also reach more stakeholders than we are until now have been doing. So that's an important development. And so then our network meeting will then also take place each year in June, and where we will discuss our priorities. So that's one of the changes when it comes to the governance of the EQAVET network. And so now I would like to explain a bit the Riga conclusions. So as you probably have seen, so the ministers of VET agreed in June last year the new priorities in the framework a bit of the Copenhagen process, and they have identified 5 or 6 new medium-term deliverables. And one of these is dealing with the quality assurance, and it emphasizes in particular the idea of feedback loops and feedback mechanism, because also what we have seen in the EQAVET survey, for example, is that the descriptors and indicators which are linked to the first 2 phases of the PDCA cycle, planning and doing cycle phases, they are often well implemented. But when it comes to the review phase and the acting phase at the end, there we see that in fact these indicators are much less applied by member states. For example, when it comes to indicator 6 or indicator 5 of the EQAVET recommendation about placement rates and about the use of skills acquired during the VET program at the workplace, we see that only about 22% of our EQAVET users use these indicators, whereas this is much higher, 80% for the other indicators at the planning and the doing phase. So therefore, we know that these 2 phases at the end of the PDCA cycle are much less applied by member states in general. And therefore, this is a bit the idea of this medium-term deliverable, to put a focus on feedback loops, so that when a member state is doing an evaluation or when it's gathering data about learner satisfaction or employer satisfaction, that also this information from these exercises are fed into the system again, and that the system is improved or is taken on board the outcome of these evaluations. So this is a bit the emphasis of the new medium-term deliverable for Riga. And so it was adopted in June last year with a horizon of 2020, and now we are currently also reflecting on how to measure progress by member states with regard to this medium-term deliverable. On the one hand, so we work, of course, together with CEDEFOP, which is our agency dealing with VET and monitoring the VET developments at national level. But we also think that we will be able to use this increased reporting to which I referred to earlier. So when member states will really now, on a yearly basis, have to document the new trends and the new developments at their level, we believe that this will be a useful source of information to document and to monitor the progress in terms of this medium-term deliverable. So this is what we expect. So we'll see now the results in 2 weeks' time, when normally the reports are due by member states. So, and then we will see to which extent we can indeed use these reports to follow and monitor progress with regard to this Riga medium-term deliverable. So that's a bit my presentation. So the overview of the framework and the implementation, as well as the political priorities defined in Riga. So if you would have questions, I would be happy to reply. Thank you.